Gentlemen, so we have an interesting class. Now, originally I was going to teach the third chapter of Daniel, and we have the papers for the third chapter of Daniel. But then I was thinking, at the end of last week's class, really there wasn't enough time to finish the second chapter. And then I was thinking about the verses in the second chapter. I said it's a shame that we skipped over those verses. Meaning we didn't skip it over, but we kind of read quickly through those verses. This introduction is here to explain why I don't have the people are coming?
Yeah,
good.
I don't want
Okay, good.
Summary.
Good.
Summary will catch them up.
Okay.
You don't mind me?
Right. So the point being that I don't have the material because originally I was going to teach the third chapter, and I said, let me teach the end of the second chapter because it really is so important. It's just such an amazing series of messages. So let me just give you a little background, bring you into the subject, and remind you what it is that we're doing. Beruchim Habaim. What we are doing is analyzing, and this is a very interesting thing because the idea of psychoanalysis is a relatively modern thing. 19th century, Sigmund Freud, C.G. Jung, and others. But what the Torah does in the book of Daniel, in this chapter that we were studying, is it gives us a psychoanalysis of the first emperor in human history, right? It enters his mind, and that's an amazingly modern thing to do. The very idea that there's a subconscious, that there's thoughts, that there's things happening, and then we have the dream, we have the interpretation of the dream. That's all in the second chapter. And I just want to refresh your memory. So you remember Nebuchadnezzar, he has this nightmare. He can't sleep at night. He keeps waking up terrified. What's the dream? So he has that idol with the gold head, right? Silver chest, and lower than that there's copper, lower than that finally he gets to iron, and at the feet, you remember, there was iron mixed with clay, right? So we explained that. But then, as I said, towards the end of the class, we kind of went really fast, and I felt bad about that. So I'm going to go backwards, okay? I'm going to, and what happened after that? We read it in the class, but we didn't explain it well. And so let me just read you the pasuk that I wanted to focus on, and it's as follows. Hazeh havaita. You were looking in the dream. Ad di hitgezeret eben dilabidain. And you saw the stone carved out, apparently from a mountain. But where do you carve stone from? Right? So you carve stone from a mountain, right? So you saw this stone carved out, but there was no hand doing the carving. Somehow the stone came out of the mountain. Umahat lesalma al ragloi. And that stone, it attacked the idol. Where did it attack it? At the weak spot. At the feet, where there was clay mixed with iron. Difarzela v'chaspa. Right? The hadeket imon, and it smashed the feet of the idol. And you know what happens to the idol, as we studied last week. The entire structure, the entire colossal comes smashing down, and it's over. I didn't explain that well. Meaning, not that I didn't explain it well, I didn't have the opportunity to explain it because we were in a rush. So today, I want to look once more at the end of the dream and tell you things that I didn't have a chance to tell you last week, okay? So we're looking at the end of the dream. Beruchim Habaim, Shalom Aleichem, how are you? V'dihazaita raglaya ve'esbe'eta. So that's what we're going to be looking at. So now it's Daniel talking. So there was two parts of Daniel's speech. So the first part of Daniel's speech, he tells the emperor what it was that he dreamed, because you remember the story. The emperor refused to relate his dream. He wanted to see who knows it. So he relates the dream. So Nebuchadnezzar is listening attentively to every word. He doesn't interrupt. We Daniel relates the dream, Daniel begins to interpret what the dream means. And we read part of that interpretation. The gold head is Nebuchadnezzar. We said the silver represents the Malchut Parasu Madai, which of course didn't exist yet, but Daniel is informing Nebuchadnezzar, no, your empire will not be forever. Yes, your empire will come to an end, and this is how it will end, right? So let's continue. V'di hazaita raglaya ve'esbe'ata minehen hasal di fehar u'minehen parzel. you saw the feet of the idol was with the legs, or the bottom part of the legs were iron. And at the toes, some of them were clay and some of them were iron. Malchu peligat teheveh. This is going to be a different type of a kingdom. This kingdom is going to have many, many parts to it, right? So it's going to start strong like iron. Remember we said, what was that? Do you remember from last week? What's that powerful, cruel empire? The Roman Empire. But then it's going to end up almost a proliferation of different nations, right? There's going to be this split, and some of them are going to be iron, signifying strength, and some of them will be clay, signifying weakness, right? I'm sorry. On the one hand, this will have the stability of iron. I'm going to explain that word in a moment. And this is what you saw, this is the meaning of what you saw, iron mixed with clay. So first of all, the word ninseba, nisbeta. What does nisbeta mean in Aramaic? So in Hebrew you have a similar word, nisavim. So the word nisavim in Hebrew, what does it mean? Stand. To stand, right? Like atem nisavim hayom. But it doesn't just mean to stand. We read in Perashat Vayesei Yaakov, what does musab mean? Standing, but it's more than that. Nisab means permanence. So there's a state of permanence, right? So Sulam Musab Arsa means there's always this connection between the Bet HaMikdash Shel Mala and Eretz Yisrael. There's always that connection. It's Nisab. It's not fleeting. So what it's telling is this last empire, which will proliferate into a whole series of states, that empire will be Nisab. What does Nisab mean? It's not like the first one. Nebuchadnezzar was about 70 years. His empire, Babylonia, fell. Alexander the Great also, his empire fell rather quickly. After he died, it split into four, right? That was the Greek empire, right? What the Romans put into place, which eventually proliferated into what we have modern day Europe. Nisab. What does Nisab mean?
Endure.
Permanent. Right? Thousands of years. Thousands of years. I mean, even the split of the Roman Empire came centuries later. So the Roman Empire was the most permanent national institution, I would say, one of the most permanent national institutions in human history. Indeed, Europe is that vestige. The European nations are a vestige of the Roman Empire. So that's number one. But it says me'arab, it says there's going to be a mixture. Why? What does the mixture mean? What is the purpose of this mixture? The esbe'at raglaya, as noted, and now again this is Daniel speaking to Nebuchadnezzar. This is the part where he's interpreting the dream, right? So as far as the toes, minehen parzel, some were made out of iron, and minehen hasaf, some were made out of clay, min kesat malchutat tehevet takifah. Some of the nations will be powerful, uminnaha tehevet tevira. Some of the nations will be fragile. So when you take clay and you throw it, it breaks. It's very easy to break it. There's a certain repetition here. Did you notice the repetition? It says, listen to the pasuk. It says that you were looking at the legs, the bottom of the legs, the feet. You see the toes. Some are iron, some are clay. And why is that? Some will be powerful, some will be weak. Some of the nations will be powerful, some of the nations will be weak. But then it repeats it. And I want to explain that. Because there is no repetition in the Torah. The Torah doesn't just repeat itself. The Torah is very precise. Every word is rich with meaning. So if you see what seems to be a repetition in the pasuk, then you're missing something. Let me read the second pasuk, which apparently is repeating, but it's not. This that you saw, iron mixed with clay, this symbolizes the fact that people will try to be mixed together, but it's not going to work. They're not going to be able to mix. The same way iron, do you ever try to put clay on iron? Doesn't stick. You can't. It doesn't stick. It'll break, right? The clay will break. It's not, you can't glue clay with iron, right? So the same way, there's going to be an attempt to cause the different people to mix together, and it's not going to work. I want to explain this. This is fantastic. And there is two levels. There's the first pasuk, there's the second pasuk. The first pasuk says, some nations will be powerful, some nations will be weak. That is describing the evolution of Rome and the splitting of Rome eventually into the various European nations. Some of these nations will be weak, some will be powerful. There's going to be an attempt to make an alliance between these nations. What do we call the alliance of the European nations? European Union, the EU, right? The EU is predicated upon the idea of a single currency which would allow all the member nations of the EU together to compete with the United States. That was the idea. The problem with the EU is that it has different nations. They're trying to unify nations that cannot be unified. So for example, Germany has a tremendous economy. Their production is among the best, the most efficient in the world, right? So that's Germany. Then you have Greece. Greece is not Germany. Greece has beautiful beaches, right? The Mediterranean Ocean, a very relaxed, laid-back lifestyle. They have siesta in the afternoon. So they try to unify, for example, Greece with Germany. I mean, under the EU, of course, right? It's not working. Because when you have different nations with different interests, there's going to be a dissonance between the nations. And there was. I mean, we know that there was a tremendous anger in Greece because the EU was forcing Greece to adopt some norms, some cultural norms, some economic norms that just didn't fit the Greek people, right? So there was tremendous bitterness, right? I'm telling this to you because what the pasuk is saying that these nations are going to try to get together, the weak ones with the strong ones, and they're going to try to make this union, but it's not going to work because there's different nations. So that's at the national level. By the way, what happened to the UK? Brexit. What is Brexit? So again, you see how this attempt to unify these European nations, which are the descendants of the Roman Empire, it's already in our lifetime. We're beginning to see the disintegration. How long will the EU last for? That's a good question. What's going to happen to the EU? Another good question. But the point being that according to Daniel, they will try to mix these different nations together. It's going to be a hodgepodge. It won't work. This doesn't work because there is a dissonance among the nations. Each nation has its own culture, its own productivity, and that's the first pasuk. But we said there was a second pasuk that repeated the same thing. The second pasuk emphasized zera. What is zera in Hebrew? Seed. So what is it telling you? That they're going to try to mix the seeds of different people together, and they're going to try to unify it, but it's not going to work. Today. There used to be a time in the Western world where, if you were of a particular ethnic denomination, you wouldn't necessarily marry somebody of a different ethnic denomination. I'm not saying that was a good design. I'm just describing to you. Okay, no, but please don't accuse me of being racist or anything else. I'm just trying to describe the history nowadays. You have to be careful what you say, especially when there's a camera, because you're racist. I'm saying that in the Western world, there was this separation of ethnicity, and then over the end of the 20th century, they began to open up international borders, tremendous immigration to Europe, tremendous immigration happening now in the United States, and the idea is to create this brotherhood where the ethnic boundaries that kept people separated would no longer be there, and we will try to unify mankind, right? That's the idea, right? What does Daniel say about this? It's going to fail. It's not going to work. There will be no unification. There will be no brotherhood. Because at the end of the day, what's going to happen is people are going to become bitter, right? People are going to become more disunified, not less disunified. That's what Daniel is saying. Daniel is saying they're going to try to mix these different races, these different people, but they will fail at that. I really think that what Daniel is describing is our days. We're literally all these ideas of different people entering the United States. The migration in Europe was incredible, and it's probably going to continue now because of certain economic conditions that are going to transpire over the next few years. There will probably be again immigration from North Africa into Europe, immigration to the United States. 5 million people came since Biden was elected. Who knows how many more million will come to the United States? the idea of unifying people, Daniel says, is going to fail. By the way, when was the last time you were walking in the street and somebody said good morning to you? Hey, how are you? Good morning. Anybody say that anymore?
No.
Right. So you see that since they're trying to create this brotherhood of man, people are more bitter, people are more angry, people just don't give a damn about you. Doesn't matter what's happening to you in public, right? A person could, drop dead in the street. Nobody really cares anymore, right? So you see the difference. I'm just talking about America. I can say that I will extrapolate that probably a similar thing is happening in Europe. So you see that they're failing, right? They're trying to mix us all and say there is no, we're all the same, we're all equal, we're all this and this and this. Got it, no problem. But it's failing. Again, all I'm describing is empirical facts. I'm not judging it, but I don't remember, since I came to this country about 3 years ago, I haven't had a single good morning. Actually, when I was hiking in Vermont once in the forest in the middle of nowhere, I said good morning to somebody and they answered me. So I was very pleased with that particular incident. But certainly in New York or any big city, I have not seen that anymore. So you see there's a certain anger and hostility that Daniel, as he said thousands of years ago, on the money. All right, let's continue.
Except when you come to Keynes, right, everybody says good morning and Shabbat Shalom.
What about outside?
Yeah, exactly.
We're our own distinct
We
nation.
are going to discuss Am Yisrael soon. We will. Okay? So you see what's going to happen to this empire. Attempts to unify the nations will fail. Attempts to unify ethnic groups will fail. Why will it fail? Because it's predicated upon serving the interests of the political establishment. It's not predicated upon truth. We'll see what the solution is. There's going to be a fantastic message in this chapter. So what's going to happen? In the days of these kings, at the end of time, Yakim, I believe we're there now. Yakim Elah Shemaya Malchu, eventually God in heaven will establish a kingdom. Dile alemin latit chabad, that this kingdom will never be destroyed. Umalchuta le'am achoran latishteveh, and this kingdom will never be replaced by another nation. God will establish on earth an eternal kingdom. This is talking about the Malchut Melech HaMashiach. So the Melech HaMashiach, when the Mashiach comes, he will establish a kingdom in accordance with the laws of God. We're going to study a little more about that soon. And this kingdom will be eternal. Tadik v'tasef kol ilen malchevata, the Melech HaMashiach, this kingdom will destroy whatever is left of the Roman Empire, whatever is left of the European Union, whatever is left of the Western world, right? And these bad values, these rotten values, vehi tekum le'al maya, and this kingdom will establish itself as the kingdom, the superpower on planet Earth, and it will be an eternal superpower. Okay, let's take a step back. The stone. What is the stone? I didn't explain it last week, did I? Right? We ran out of time. So we have the idol, and what attacks the idol? The stone. Okay, so on the one side of the boxing ring, you have this giant, big idol, right? Gold, silver, copper, iron, clay. On the other side of the boxing ring, you have a little stone, right? And there's a confrontation. First of all, why? What does the stone represent? Who does the stone represent? Right? You understand my question? So I want to give you the answer to that. There is a pasuk, we say it in the Hallel, and it has the word even in it, stone. What pasuk am I referring to? Even ma'asu habonim hayeta lerosh pinat. There is a stone. And this stone was despised by the builders, by the architects, by the builders. And this stone will actually become the cornerstone of the entire building. They made a mistake, meaning when you build a building, you want to have a cornerstone and all the other stones are placed relative to the cornerstone, right? And the stone that we're talking about was perfect. It would allow for a stable, beautiful building.
The Hebrew term for this stone is Even HaRosha.
Right.
Even HaRosha.
Right, that's in the book of Zechariah, correct. So the Even Ma'asu Habonim, this stone was despised by those ruling the world, but this stone will eventually become the cornerstone of the world. Okay, that stone is Am Yisrael. Okay, another pasuk in Parashat Vayechi, at the end of the book of Bereshit, Yaakov Avinu gives a beracha to all of his sons. One of the berachot is Yosef, and Porat Yosef, and Porat Ale'ain. At the end of the beracha, it says, V'teshev etan kashto, Vayafozu zeroei yadav. How does it continue? Mideh avir Yaakov, Misham roeh Even Yisrael. So the Jewish people are called Even Yisrael, the stone of Israel. Why? Why the stone? Okay, but you see it's twice. Because the stone is the foundation of the building. So we're going to become the foundation of humanity. But I want to explain that a little more. What is the symbol? So the stone is one solid, cohesive substance. And not many, many minerals. Like the idol was gold, silver, copper, iron, clay. It's one cohesive material, right? Number one. But more than that, it's not just that the stone is cohesive, it's solid, it's stable, but there is something that came from the stone that is the most precious thing that ever came to this planet. What am I referring to? ויתן למשה ככלותו לדבר איתו בהר סיני, שהנה לוחות העדות, לוחות אבן. The Torah, the Aseret HaDiberot were written on stone, tablets of stone, Eben, right? So here you see the relationship between Am Yisrael that received the Torah, the Aseret HaDiberot that was written on stone, eternal, solid, unchanging, unified, cohesive, and that's why we are called Even Yisrael, because we, like the Torah, are solid, we're cohesive, we're unified when we accept the Torah, of course. This is what happens to Am Yisrael. So we receive the law on the stone, on the Luchot HaBerit, and we are called the stone because we will one day become the cornerstone of all the nations in the world. So that's the Eben. So let me now that you know what the stone is, let me ask another question. So now you see what the Jewish people refer to as Eben, as a stone. We receive the Torah, the Diberot, and we will become like the stone, solid, unchanging, stable. Okay. Why are the Goy nations, the empires, the Western political system likened to an idol? You understand? The political system of the West is like an idol. We see the idol in the dream that represents the empires and eventually the Western world that we live in today. Because when you live in that type of country, you must worship the leaders. By worship the leaders, I don't understand me they have to bring korbanot and pray to the leaders. I mean, you have to be beholden to the leader. You may not question authority. You're supposed to be devoted. They tell you to do something, you do it, and you do it in a devoted way. Questions are not allowed. Take communist countries like Joseph Stalin. You know how many people Joseph Stalin killed in Russia? At least. I mean, they say conservatively 20, 30 million. They say maybe 60 million if you include Ukraine. I mean, the guy was a maniac. The guy was a sick pervert. He really was. I mean, by all accounts, Joseph Stalin was just one of the worst human beings. I mean, I don't know if Yamach Shemov, the chancellor of the Third Reich, killed as many people as Stalin. Not to compare. I don't like making comparisons. But the guy was a sick person. What he did to Russia, I mean, he destroyed Russia. He brought mass starvation. Right? I mean, the only one who was probably worse than him in terms of the number of people he killed was the other communist leader in China, Mao Zedong, whatever his name is. I mean, I think he might have killed 80 million people. I mean, these people are insane. They're sick, perverted people. Now, there was the day where finally the Satan didn't want to have anything to do with Joseph Stalin, but Hashem kept coming to him. He says, listen, Mr. Malach HaMavet, you have to kill him. He says, listen, it's Aib, I don't want to. On the Malach HaMavet, I still have some dignity. Do I have to go to the person? Hashem finally told him, yes, you have to go to the person and kill him. So the day came, 1952, when the Malach HaMavet went to Joseph Stalin and killed him. I want to read to you a diary, just 2-3 lines from a diary, right? Written by a Russian who lived there and went to the funeral. Here's a quote. On March 5th, 1953, an event took place that shattered Russia, the death of Joseph Stalin, right? The death of Stalin. I found it impossible to imagine him dead. He was a godlike figure. So much had he been an indispensable part of life. He wasn't just a leader, a ruler, he was an indispensable part of life. A sort of general paralysis came over the country. Trained to believe that Stalin was taking care of everyone. He's the one who takes care of us. The butcher, right? Killed tens of millions of people. I mean, they have roads in Siberia that literally people would be sent to the roads to work and they just paved over the bodies. I mean, tens of thousands of people under the paved road. I mean, you know, things that you can't even ever read the Gulag Archipelago of Solzhenitsyn. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's just something, you don't see the depth of evil and wickedness till you understand who these people are. Anyway, continuing. I'm sorry. I was digressing. The whole of Russia wept. So did I. We wept sincerely with grief, and perhaps also with fear of the future. And then he describes what's happening, throngs of people crying, and then there was people crushing each other. It was just, I was going to bring it, I said it. We're in a knies, we can't read this, right? The idol. I'm sorry?
They were brainwashed.
Yeah, of course. I mean, right. Again, they were brainwashed by the authority, that is correct.
My mom's uncles were sent to Siberia by Stalin because they were studying Torah.
Wow.
And they vanished.
Right. Am Yisrael is the hope for humanity. I'm going to get there soon. We are literally the hope for humanity, because the Goyim will always choose to be brainwashed rather than the other choice, which is use your brain and escape tyranny. No, they will say, I prefer to be brainwashed and believe Stalin is God, and I will worship Stalin and be devoted to him and snitch on anybody who says Stalin is no good. So that's just one example in the history of madness, but there's so many more examples. By the way, and not to compare. And I know that there's a scientific way to approach it. I'm just bringing this as a modern example. And I'm not going to express my own opinion. There are some people who took the vaccine, there's some people who didn't take the vaccine, and fair enough. And I think that's legitimate. I respect both sides. I respect people who took it because they felt they needed to take it, and I respect people who didn't take it because they made a medical decision not to take it. I want to tell you my opinion about government-enforced mandates, and it's as follows. This is not my opinion about the vaccine, right? I think the vaccine, I went to my doctor, I had whatever discussion I had with my doctor, private discussion, and thank God I'm fine, Baruch Hashem. I don't regret my decision, one way or the other, whatever that decision was. But I want to tell you something about government-enforced mandates. I really think that political systems that don't know how to fill a pothole on Ocean Parkway shouldn't be in charge of telling us what medicines to put in our bodies. I'm not saying the vaccine is good or not good. That's a different question. That's a question you can have with your doctor. Have a discussion, should I take the vaccine? If you're old, or you're overweight, or you have some comorbidity, the doctor will probably tell you, yeah, you should take the vaccine, and you're an idiot if you don't take it. And if you're young and you're not, the doctor may say you don't need to take it. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not pretending to be one. I didn't read too much medical literature on the subject. I got vaccinated for the flu. I got vaccinated when I was young for whatever, I don't know, rubella, chicken pox, measles. I don't know what they get vaccinated for. That's all good. God bless my parents for doing that. That's not the point. Governments cannot fill a pothole. They can't build a toilet seat in San Francisco for under, I don't know, $10 million. They're going to tell us what to do with our bodies. So why do they do that? Devotion. You have to be devoted. You must accept what the government tells you about medicine. It has nothing to do with it. The government cares. The government doesn't give a damn about us. Honestly, just put that on the side. They don't care about us. They care about our subservience, about our obedience. They want to tell us what to do. And you have no right to question them. If you're in the military, healthy, strong person, who was that guy, NBA player that didn't want to take the vaccine? It was kind of funny. There was an NBA player that didn't want to take it. Then there was a tennis player. They didn't let him into the country. You understand how funny this is? There was a famous tennis player. There was a U.S. Tennis Open. They didn't want to let him into the country for our safety. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Next time, maybe fill the potholes and then tell us about whether who should and shouldn't be taking vaccines. The point is, tyranny wants subservience. They want us to be obedient. That's why it's an idol. An idol, what do you do to an idol? You pray to an idol, right? That's it. That's the political establishment. A Jew will never worship a tyrant. That's the story of Hanukkah, right? A Jew will never worship a tyrant. So what is the conclusion if a Jew will never worship a tyrant? So you have this idol, you have this political establishment, there will be a confrontation. There cannot be a story of history that doesn't lead to a confrontation between this stone, which represents the Torah, right, which represents Am Yisrael, and we will not submit to a tyrant and to that idol. That's why they clash. You see why there must be a clash between the stone and the idol? Okay. I want to just give you a few nice tidbits. All right. Next thing about the idol. The idol is made of gold, it's made of silver, it's made of copper, it's made of iron, it's made of clay. That represents the Goy world. My father wrote a whole book on the hierarchical structure of pagan humanity. It's called The Shadow of History. He wrote a few other books on the subject and articles on the subject as well. Pagan political systems are based on hierarchy. Sometimes the hierarchies are obvious, like if you go to India, they say, you're a nothing, you're a nobody. If you live in the Western world, they're not going to tell you you're a nothing, you're a nobody. They'll treat you like a nothing or a nobody. So, for example, while they're imposing certain rules on me and you, those rules work for me and you. They have a different set of rules. If you take a plane, you will now see on the airplane ticket how much carbon the plane is producing. That's an issue, right? But if you're the climate czar, you will take private jets all over the world. That's okay, because we live in a hierarchy, and there are people who are more important than you. If you have to go somewhere, that's less important than the climate czar. That's why he takes private jets, and when you get your airplane ticket, you will see that you just produced 29,000 pounds or tons, I don't know, of carbon dioxide. So that's the hierarchical structures of the pagan political systems are obvious, and that's why the statue is built in this hierarchical strata, right? There's gold, there's silver, okay. What is a stone? Is there any hierarchy in the stone? Nothing. It's cohesive. There's one material. Because Judaism rejects hierarchy. So what makes us cohesive? What gives us this cohesiveness? The Torah. So when you have the stones of the Torah, the Luchot HaBerit, Luchot Eden, we become the Eden. We become the cornerstone of humanity. Now, let me tell you something about the Jewish king. The Jewish king was not above the law. He could not abrogate the law. He could not replace the law. He could not modify the law. In fact, one of the first things that the king had to do when he became king is write what? He has to write the Sefer Torah. And he had to have the Sefer Torah on him wherever he went to symbolize the fact that the Jewish king is not above the law. That's in every single pagan society. You don't like the law? Get into power and change the law. What does Congress do all the time? They change the law all the time. Constitution doesn't matter anymore. That's okay. I'm not saying I'm for it. I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just describing it. It's like this in every single country. There is no country where the political establishment doesn't decide, this law I don't like, I'm going to abrogate the law, I'll change the law, and do whatever law suits my particular needs. There is only one nation that does not do this. Which nation is that? Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael, v'chatav lo Sefer Torah. The king must write a Sefer Torah to say, this Torah is above me. The word of God is above me. I may be the king, and we have to respect the king. We give the king tremendous honor, tremendous wealth, everything, but he's under the Torah. You understand? So there's no way. There's no way. There will be a war. I don't know. I'm not one of these, people say next. There's always, every year. When I lived in Israel, there wasn't a year where some rabbi somewhere didn't say that he had a Kabbalistic thing that the Mashiach is coming. I don't know. I have no idea. I have no clue. I do know there will be a war. By the way, what is that war called? Gog and Magog. So Gog and Magog is going to be the war where they enter Jerusalem and they say enough of Am Yisrael. The Jewish people are a threat to us. They don't believe in the idol. They believe in cohesion around the stone of the Torah, the solid word of God. There will be a war between Am Yisrael and the Goyim. Okay, that's going to be the end, the war that ends all wars. Okay, before I continue to the last part, I have 10 minutes left, or a little more maybe. Actually, any questions? Okay. Continuing, Daniel continues to speak to the king, interpreting the dream of the king. So continue. This that you saw, that from the mountain there was carved a stone, Dilabidain, and it wasn't with human hands. Which stone is that? The Luchot HaBerit. Right? It says explicitly. The Luchot Maaseh Elohim, right? Right? It was Luchot were carved by God. The second Luchot were carved by Moshe Rabbeinu, because it says the first Luchot were made by God. Luchot, right? The Hadeket, this stone smashed the idol. Parzela, Nechasha, Kaspa, V'dahava. The entire idol came smashing down. Elah Rav Hoda Lemalka Madi Neheve Achare Dena. The great God is telling you, Your Majesty, what is going to happen at the end of time. The Yasiv Hilma, the dream that you had is Yasiv. It's true. It's an eternal truth. Umheman Pishre, and the interpretation that I gave you for the dream is the correct interpretation. That's the end of Daniel's, let's call it a soliloquy, where he's talking to Nebuchadnezzar, non-interrupted, for a long series of Pesukim. That was it. Now, I want to say something else. All the nations in the world are created by certain, let's call it natural, historical processes, right? So there's certain historical processes that lead to the downfall of nations, to the rising up of nations, right? And within the context of history, we can study history and understand why this nation rose up, why this nation was eventually destroyed, what happened, the fall of Rome, right? The barbarians came in, corrupt political leaders and all that, okay. But it says that the stone was carved out of the mountain. So that stone represents the Torah, it represents Am Yisrael, because Am Yisrael was formed unlike any other nation. We were not formed by natural, historical events. We were formed out of the mountain, the same way that Luchot HaBerit came from the mountain. Am Yisrael, we came from the mountain, from Har Sinai. We entered into this eternal covenant with God, right? So that's how Am Yisrael comes into being. It is an act of God. If it wasn't for the act of God forming us as He did by the mountain, there would be no Am Yisrael. So this is Am Yisrael versus the world. So I want to make sure I have time. So before I'll save like 5 minutes. Let me read the Pesukim, okay? Because next week I really do want to go to the third chapter, okay? So I'm just going to read the Pesukim now. Take about 4 minutes to finish these Pesukim, and then I want to give you a thought at the end, okay? At this point, Nebuchadnezzar is overwhelmed. He literally falls down on his face. Will Daniel Segid, and he begins to worship Daniel like a god. And he instructs the priests immediately bring him libations, bring him incense, as if he's a god. Avodah Zarah. And the Chachamim say that if you look at the pasuk, it says, he asked the people to do it, but immediately Daniel stopped. He said, no, you're not going to do Avodah Zarah on me. No. So he stopped it. That's why he says, Amal lenasach aleh. Anem al-Khaled Daniel ve'amar, min keshot ilahachon hu elaha elahin umare malchin ve'galeh razim. The king tells Daniel, there is no question that your God is the God above all gods, is the Lord above all kings, and he can see the secrets. Yechelta lemigleh razadena, because you were able to enter my mind, enter my subconscious, and pick up from my subconscious things that were hidden. Only a true God could do that. Edain Makali Daniel Rabbi. And at that point, the king appoints Daniel and he gives him 2 jobs. First, he gives him Matenan Ravivan Sagiani Habe. He gives him tremendous gifts. Daniel probably becomes one of the richest people in Babylonia at that point. Ve'hoshlete al kol medinat Babel. Daniel becomes the viceroy of all of Babylonia, the vizier. Berav Signin al kol hakimei Babel. And he became the head of the Intellectual Academy of Science. I know they have Academy of Science in America. He became the head intellectual in Babylonia. All other, you want to write a thesis, you wanted to write a paper, you wanted to get it peer reviewed, everything had to do Everything had to be under Daniel. Incredible. But I have to say, this is probably one of the most amazing things where you have a person who ran the country, the most powerful person in the country, was also the smartest person in the country, right? It's an incredible thing what happened in Babylonia. The Daniel be'amat min malka, and then something else, and this is really nice. You know, like we're taught in power, you know, in power games, there's certain rules of power that you have to follow, right? One of the rules of power is keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer, right? And there's stories in history of people who didn't follow that rule, who wanted to be nice to their friends, and then the friends betrayed them and had them killed. I'm talking about emperors and kings. And then on the other hand, when you had kings who understood the rule and they brought their enemies into the fold, they did well. So that's just one of the rules of power in the Goy pagan political system. Look what Daniel does. Daniel tells the king, these friends of mine, I want you to promote them and make the three of them, remember the ones who didn't want to eat non-kosher food? I want you to make them the administrators of Babylonia. So they were also promoted. Daniel bitra malka, and Daniel stayed in the court of the king. He became the personal advisor of Nebuchadnezzar. Everything goes through Daniel. Okay. I want to talk to you about something, right? I really believe this, and my father, Allah used to say this, and that's one of the reasons he moved to Israel. He said that the future of humanity is in Israel, right? And I want to deal with that a little. I want to tell you why we say that, because when a person does something in his life, whatever you do in your life, you want to have positive feelings about what you're doing. You want to feel like you're, if you're a doctor, you're helping people, you're giving them medicine, you're curing people, whatever you're doing. If you're a mathematician, maybe you're teaching people, making people more intelligent. So you want to have these positive emotions, but you want positive emotions that make life worth living, right? And, the positive emotion that gives us hope, that drives us forward, right? It's always going to be a positive emotion that's experienced in relation to a unified goal. Jordan Peterson talks about this. I consider Jordan Peterson to be one of the great intellectuals of our ages. He's absolutely fabulous, and he talks a lot about this higher goal. And the higher the goal, the higher the unified goal, the greater the positive emotion. So you have Am Yisrael, the stone representing Ahdut. The Ahdut can only be around the unified goal, right? So this unified goal needs to be a transcendental one, right? Because if it's transcendental, it's eternal, and then you feel that you're doing something that will have eternal roots, right? So there is true hope. And with this true hope, fear can become extinguished. So the Jewish people, let's talk about the Jewish people. The Pasuk says, the Pasuk says that the Jewish people, they came as one around the mountain. And the Chachamim say, what does it say? It just says, it says, they is plural form, but Vayicha means singular form. And the answer is what I just said, right? A positive goal, all right, a higher goal, a transcendental goal in relation to a unified experience. Am Yisrael was so unified at that moment when they received the Torah. When they accepted the Torah, they became like that stone, powerful, no differences within them in the sense that there's complete cohesion, no hierarchy. And we believe this is going to happen in the Yom Mashiach. Now, Am Yisrael is, you look at Israeli politics, you have so many different, interests, and everybody's pushing it this way and that way. Okay, I know we're not there. I get that. But we believe that we will get there, that Am Yisrael will once again become unified around the Torah. Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged Ahar, describing what happened in Har Sinai. It's going to happen in Yemot HaMashiach, and it's going to be the greatest story that was ever told. The story of a nation of after thousands of years returned to the Torah, returned to the book. They used to be the people of the book. We lost the book. We're no longer the people of the book. One day we will become the people of the book, and we will reach that feeling of unification. And that is the greatest power ever. And you don't have that in the Goyim. In the Goyim, you have bitterness, you have cynicism, there's politicians. I mean, even America, the greatest country that ever was, second to Malchut Bet David, second to the kingdom of David. I mean, what is it today? Unfortunately, it's not what it used to be. It's It's a dying carcass of a pig that, people are encircling it and taking whatever fat they can take, for their own self-interest, and it's not in a good place, right? The world, humanity needs Am Yisrael. They are looking to Am Yisrael, not the nations of the world in the sense of the politicians, the nations of the world in terms of the citizens, the people, the simple individuals. They need hope. There is no hope today. Religion has been extinguished. Values have been destroyed. Politicians brazenly flaunt the law and manipulate people for their own interests. People need the story of Daniel to take place. They need to see that stone, the unified people in the city of Jerusalem, following the Torah. When that happens, we won't need the stone to smash the idol physically. The whole idol will just disintegrate, because at the intellectual level, who will want to have anything to do with that idol when you can look at the light of Jerusalem and just go into the city and bask in the glory of God? So the story of Daniel is a story of great hope. The nations of the world are looking for us to achieve that hope. Have a great evening. I'm sorry, yes, you may ask a question. Only because, yes. No, yeah.
I can't help but wonder if the stone that David threw at Goliath, there's a certain symbolism between that and the Jewish nation.
I didn't think about that. Interesting, so I like it. The one stone destroys a whole. That's a nice point. I have to think about it. Good question, right? One stone and the whole giant comes, boom, right? But it represents the power of God versus the power of these,
And even says, "Ani ba b'shem Hashem."
They say, Ani ba b'shem Hashem. Yeah, exactly. I like that. Okay, you know what? Good point. Rabbi Hananya ben Akashya Omer.